Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the What Worked For You show. Today we're talking money, but not just really money like dollars and cents per se, rather managing money as a business owner. We're not talking bookkeeping, we're talking much higher level. We're talking about as business owners, how do we make sure we keep a solid handle on our finances when we're building our business, when we're already running a successful business and we want to tighten it down a bit and get even better, or even if we want to exit the business. Our guest today has played in all these spaces. He has a ton of expertise. How about that, everyone? 24 plus years in financial leadership. He's done billions in capital for venture capital deals over 15 years. That's a lot of experience. You see a lot of business over 15 years. He's raised over 500 million. He's participated in various mergers and acquisitions, including successful exits. He is a fractional CFO expert. So for all of you that don't have time for a full-time CFO or the capital, no problem. He can help or direct you in a way to get that fractional CFO, as that's a field that's been picking up a lot of momentum in recent years. He's been educated at Harvard and Wharton. He helps business owners today take command of their financial future in their businesses to ensure the success that we all set out to do. Salvatore Tirabassi, I don't know if I got that right. I
You got
apologize
that
if I
right.
did it.
Tirabassi, yep.
Tirabassi, okay, I got it. Man, I'm excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Frank. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. Let's dive in. You've done so much. It's very impressive. So first of all, I applaud you for your success. Going from going to school at Harvard, Warren, obviously prestigious schools, well known in the business community, to leading billion-dollar venture capital. That's a big shift. When you reflect on that journey, like what's the common thread? Because you've seen a lot through all these different things. What's
I
high
think
level?
for me, the thread is I really like um, exploring innovation, but also problem solving along the way and bringing innovation to places and businesses that may not necessarily have access to it. So I would say, like, the beginning part of my career where I was involved in a lot of venture capital, it was really more about seeking out innovative opportunities. But now, like, once I got into the operating world and became a CFO and now run my CFO services firm with a team of CFOs, for us, it's really about taking all of our knowledge and awareness of the new innovative kind of technologies, approaches, financing structures, financing sources that are available for small and medium-sized businesses, and then making it available to them. And so it's this, process of like having access to innovation, being interested in it, and then being able to apply it.
Love it. So let's talk about innovation for a moment. You said that word a few times, and that's a word that, quite frankly, I've learned overwhelms a lot of people. It's this word where it's like, well, we need to be innovative, right? And then you'll hear things people talk about, what's your unique selling proposition. So there's kind of like the kissing cousin, the word unique. And so you hear these things, and a lot of business owners I've met over the years, they're like, well, I don't know how to be innovative. I mean, I'm just trying to do X, Y, Z, or I'm trying, right? They're doing their product, they're doing their service. And it almost seems like this overwhelming thought of, I've got to
Mm.
come up with this new thing.
Well, there's two ways to think about it, I think. There's maybe more than two ways, but I think the way you're thinking about it is like it's an entrepreneur or a business owner thinking, I've got to fundamentally harness innovation in this thing that I'm trying to sell to the market, right? That's one version of innovation. And if you applied that to like a bakery franchise, uh, what would it look like? It would look like, and I'm using a bakery franchise because I'm trying to take something that's really doesn't have a whole lot of innovation in it, necessarily. Like people have been baking breads for thousands of years.
Sure,
But
sure.
how do you innovate? And there it might be like um, some new product version of the bread or some variation of what you do with the bread, like sandwiches or whatever, and that could be your big sort of innovation, right? This and let's not get into like tech innovation in the tech world. I'm trying to keep it very sort of base at a very basic level. The second part of innovation, though, is what are the things that you can change inside your business that don't necessarily change the product that you're offering, that make your business much more effective and profitable.
Mm, mm,
So, in an example, there might be, you might be an entrepreneur who's built, I don't know, a 10 million revenue business, and your growth is stuck because you don't have enough capital to grow the business. And in the current market environment that we're in now, there's actually a lot of innovation that's been done in the fintech world for bringing capital, some small amounts, sometimes it gets a little bit bigger, into entrepreneurial led businesses to enable them to grow. So the innovation for you might be like, hey, I want to learn about what aspects of the capital markets are available to me as an entrepreneur that aren't me just walking into a bank branch and trying to get a loan from a bank. Are there other avenues that I can explore that will allow me to innovate my balance sheet, bring some capital in the business, and give me more of an opportunity to grow? Another example of bringing innovation sort of behind the scenes might be um, finding more time for yourself and for your main members of your staff by applying certain types of innovative technologies that are not hard to implement to make you go faster. Obviously, in the world of agentic AI, there's a lot of that stuff that could potentially be added to your business to cut down the amount of time it takes to do things that deliver your product or service. So those are like innovations behind the scenes, and they're all about maintaining pace of your business and speeding it up versus the one that I think everybody always focuses on, which is like I've got to change my product and I've got to have this amazing product. They're both very valuable, and you should always aspire to be innovative in both areas, but one the internal side might be a little bit easier to bite off for some people and to conceptualize, especially if they're selling certain products and services that are not you know on the forefront of technology where there is a lot of innovation that can happen.
No, that makes sense. Like I'm in real estate, so right, like plumbers plumb, electricians do electrical, right? Like there's not, you might see a little new thing here and there, but by and large, light switches are light switches, pipes are pipes, right? So that's good to give that clarity because a lot of I've seen that a lot. They're like they do lean more toward the first example you gave
Yeah,
versus the
but that may
second.
not be
So
readily available. It depends on what kind of business you're in. And I
sure,
would say the ones who are ready made for the product innovation, they're usually out there looking for venture capital. They're not all of them. I've seen some uh, founder-owned businesses that are very much on the forefront of tech innovation, but they really aren't interested in accessing the venture capital markets. Um, but it goes both ways.
sure, no, absolutely. So you mentioned the tech. Obviously, the biggest innovation in recent years, AI. Like we all know about it, it's infiltrating everything.
Yeah,
Uh, a lot of it good, some of it maybe not so good, right? Like anything else, there's good solutions out there, and then some that are perhaps not quite up to snuff. Where do you spent all these years with venture capital, and you built businesses and those sorts of things. Where do you think that world is going? Because it seems like there's a new AI tool every other day.
yeah.
So who do you think's gonna survive? Like obviously all these tools can't survive.
The bakers are going to survive,
The bakers
probably.
will absolutely survive.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting world that we're in. I think that like there's a lot of people that are talking about, is AI like another bubble, kind of like the way the internet bubble was? And I was around when I was doing deals when the internet bubble burst. And I think that there is a big difference between these two hugely innovative um, technology events that have happened in our lifetimes. When the internet one happened, there was a lot of infrastructure building, trying to understand how end user technology fit with access to bandwidth. And there was a lot of dependency on people needing access to basic infrastructure in order to take advantage of a lot of the products that were being sold at that time.
Mm,
You know, if you just think about like what it was like to browse, the first version of ESPN.com on a dial-up line versus your first broadband connection. But we're so far beyond that now, where the infrastructure has different issues that you're going to face in the AI world, mainly related to power consumption. But the structure to like do massive processing on a large scale, it pretty much exists, right? And so now what you've got people who can take these agents and take this AI and just self-iterate to build new and innovative applications. So it's it's got a lot of fundamental underpinnings that I think make it less likely to be a bubble. I mean, there'll be winners and losers, but is there going to be like a big implosion through an overvaluation? I see it as less likely
mm,
um,
mm.
today. And I think even if you compare the valuations in the public markets, the internet bubble ones were, I think, not way ahead, but they were definitely further ahead over their skis than we are today with the AI. So even that provides a bit of a buffer. But regardless, like if the market does come down, these innovations are going to continue to happen, and it's not going to slow that down. I don't think, because the winners who do well are going to have a ton of momentum. So now, who's going to be left? Like, what does it mean? I it's definitely going to disintermediate some entry level jobs, lower paying jobs. I think entry level developers who are writing code, I think that's one area where they're going to need to really shift how they train these people so that they could take more advantage of AI. But you do also need fewer of them. I think a lot of the offshore development becomes less interesting to companies. That's one area that I would think is going to get hurt by AI, because it basically effectively allows you to onshore with agents, and then you don't need to go offshore anymore for less expensive developers. I mean, I'll leave it at that. Those are sort of like we're like in the early innings.
Sure. It's interesting you mentioned the developers. I say I was playing with code. I really wasn't. I was playing with AI. AI was playing with code for me for this little agent thing with AI. And I was actually thinking I had a code editor, but I didn't really know what it was doing. I was like, hey, AI, I ran it and it said this. Oh, yeah, just do this, this, this. And I'm like, you don't even
Sure.
have to know
Yeah,
it.
you don't. I mean, I use AI for writing small bits of code, also doing different types of analysis, and it works just fine. You know,
Yeah. You have a
it does what
full
it it
set.
does it does what it promises to do for the most part.
It does, it does. And I remember when some of the offshore tech was building momentum, I used to be in former IT 15 years plus years ago, and I remember when those days just like so it's really wild to see how that dynamic is shifting. So interesting times ahead. So speaking of interest, you spent 15 years of in venture capital. You evaluated several businesses. What made some thrive? what did you find separated the winning businesses from the ones that struggled?
Um, the winning businesses, it may not appear so at the time, but you realize it over time. They're in a business model that's got the wind at its back, and they're going into kind of they're like flowing in a jet stream that's fast moving and has a lot of opportunity surrounding it that allows them to operate more freely and be able to deal with the bumps and bruises and mistakes along the way more readily than other companies are able to. That may not be kind of in a jet stream of where there's a lot of momentum. And a lot of times you might find that certain businesses are really define their market where it does appear that they have a lot of momentum, but there could be impediments to how that works. Like the buyer market doesn't make decisions in a way that they really thought, or the buying cycles are long. Um, these are all impediments that get in the way from somebody sort of executing very cleanly and successfully along the way. Um, and every venture presentation you're going to see is going to make it look like there is a large market, but I think it's just understanding like is the market size and the momentum in it really aligned with the way this projected product is going to be consumed. And that's where there could be a disconnect. And that's a lot of, in the venture market, there's a lot of people who talk about product market fit. That's a term that they use in the business. And that really is getting to the crux of that issue, right? Is like, yeah, I see this big market. Can you show me some sales and how those sales are going to be repeatable over time? Because that's really how you can demonstrate that there's momentum in your offering and it's really highly desired. Um, an example uh, I would I could give you is if you look at a business like Canva. Are you familiar with Canva?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So Canva, um, if you talk to any one of my kids who are regular users of uh, Instagram and are need to do higher end sort of presentations for their college classes or whatever. The Canva is ubiquitous, right? It's not like I need an Adobe suite to design what I'm doing.
Right.
And where a company like Canva becomes so successful is there's this massive market momentum where high quality graphics, photo editing, et cetera, are really used on a daily basis by many, many, many more people than ever did before. And Canva gives them this online service that just fits perfectly into that need, and they can buy it at prices that are really affordable, basically globally.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
it's a huge market, and they've got this product market fit and pricing strategy that just allows them to kind of just roll through and just take over the whole segment of the market that some people may never have even heard of Adobe before. Actually, most people in that market maybe didn't hear about it, until much later, especially the younger cohorts of consumers that use that product. Um, that's an example of product market fit, large market size, and having a lot of momentum. Um, and it takes a little bit of insight to be able to see that as an opportunity. But again, if you're buying into like Instagram posting, LinkedIn posting, Facebook posting, and making it look good, it in hindsight, it's kind of obvious that a company like Canva could be very successful. It just has to be really well executed, which is something that they obviously did.
Yeah. No, that's a great word, and it also reminds me of another company that is a household name now, and that's Zoom.
Yeah,
Before, you think before COVID, you'd had GoToWebinar and some of these other services and these different types of online meeting type things. Then this pandemic shows up. All of a sudden, we're all on Zoom, and it's like, who are these other people? And now, I never even hear of
never even hear
GoToWebinar.
of them. Yeah.
And
Zoom has
it's
been around for actually a long time. I think I want to
they
say
were.
Zoom was probably predates COVID by about maybe 10 years. I'm not totally sure,
Yeah, it was a while.
but yeah, but their fundamental insight, irrespective of what happened with COVID, was full featured and the ability to get it in a bite-sized increment for any individual, right? And now all of a
Yeah.
sudden, everybody needs to talk on video, and whether you're in a business or not, you want to download you want to download Zoom and start using it, and they make it
Absolutely.
pretty inexpensive to use, right?
Yeah,
In the grand
they
scheme of things,
it's like they caught that wave and they rode it, and they rode it all the way to a household name.
basically, yeah.
And so I guess it was a couple years ago. I sat in a room with a very successful businessman, and he talked about this idea about waves in business. So I love that you brought it up. And he was like, as an entrepreneur, always be looking at the waves, and then how do you fit in? What are your thoughts? Like, how do we as entrepreneurs search for those waves? Like, how do you find it, right?
That's really tough. I think, you know, some of it's luck. I think that if you have a lot of awareness and forethought of um, different things that are happening in the market, um, you obviously can be much more open and have a purview that sees these things coming. And then, ultimately, it's there's certain people who can just see something and like put a couple of things together and then have you know, the the own internal motivation to kind of go after it and sort of chase it. Um, I think that uh, if you're already in a business, obviously your purview is much more narrowed because you really are prioritizing the things that are going to be most valuable to what it is that you're doing today. And in that case, I find that really networking and having, interactions with other people that are either similarly situated to you as a business owner or in your industry is really valuable in order to gain insights into what different people are trying. Like an example I can give you is have I'm in a networking group in Connecticut, and I was at one of these networking events, and I met B2B sales, the head of a tech firm that does B2B sales, and we were talking about cold outreach, which is a whole technique that B2B businesses use to find new clients. A lot of it's done by email, and he told me that he had basically just gotten rid of his, I guess he had like three people on his staff who were doing outbound phone calls to CEOs of businesses that might need their IT services, and he replaced them with AI agents that he bought from a company that the company provides a full service, and these bots sound like humans and they do all the outreach and they've got a whole script. They can handle the rebuttals, and then they can schedule the call for the live salesperson to go in and actually do the scoping of what the opportunity is. Now,
Mm.
I heard about that, and obviously I could potentially use it in my own business, although that's not really was my immediate takeaway. But what I realized was I had a couple of clients in our portfolio who actually really could benefit from that. And so I play the proxy for my client owners in that instance. But had they gone to that type of an event, they would have come across somebody who doesn't compete with them because they're in IT and these guys do other things, but they both need B2B sales outreach. And
Mm,
here you are, you meet somebody who all of a sudden is actually doing it and telling you that it worked. And you can ask a ton of questions about, like, how did you pick the vendor? How long did it take to get them up and running? How long have you been using it for? What's your close rate been like? And this guy could answer all these questions for you. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a real live opportunity to change something in your own business.
yeah.
And so when you're in your own business and you're staying in your lane, I think the networking piece and getting out there and meeting companies that compete with you and also companies that are similarly situated but in other industries is extremely valuable way to see the opportunities and then grab them and pull them into your own business.
Mm, I love it. Kind of almost a little bit of like that M&A, right? Kind of like, hey, who can we merge with? Who can we
Yeah,
buy?
well, I mean, with M&A, you gotta really like boil the ocean a bit on who the opportunities are and talk to a lot of different companies before
Yeah.
you can kind of figure out which one is really a good fit.
And so, do you think that's where the whole AI thing will go? Just as I was just sitting there thinking, you think about all these different industries where, and you're hearing M&A a lot more these days, especially now with social media. Now you've got like gurus on social media making it sound like it's as easy as, buying a lollipop down the street, right? But,
Not easy,
that's
not
that world,
easy.
we get it. But, they're opportunistic. Hey, it's capitalism, right?
It's a good
But
soundbite.
it's a great soundbite for a lot of people. This is true. But is that effectively what we can expect with AI? You're gonna have all these companies, and then your big gorillas, so to speak, your Microsoft, your Apple, your whoever is going to start. Well, you know what? I really like what they do. We're going to buy them, and we're going to buy them, and da da da. Or do you think the AI
I don't think
companies?
so.
You think it's so innovative it'll stay more independent, right?
Yeah, there'll be winners that become, you know, at least for a forever or for a period of time, like a major player that is driving its own destiny. Um, and I think that these big, highly valued entities that have extraordinarily sophisticated M&A capabilities are going to pick their spots, but they're not going to be, out there just buying anything. I mean, if they're in the in the main jet stream of AI innovation themselves, they've got plenty to innovate internally before having to look externally.
Mm,
Um, I think that obviously if you look at Microsoft with its relationship with OpenAI, obviously Google's got its own uh, internal AI effort that the consumer world sees as Gemini. Um, Twitter or X is doing its own thing. Um, Anthropic is independent. I happen to use Claude, which is Anthropic's product, pretty extensively, and it's an excellent product. Um, I think if you think about Amazon and Apple, it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing, or if they end up leveraging, the technology that's already out there. Apple of all of the companies, to me seems like a logical one to have a very strong owned and operated um, AI capability that's consumer facing. You could argue that Siri was supposedly the first version of it, but I to this day, even with the whatever upgrades they made, I still can't believe how awful it is. I mean,
yeah.
it can't even find it can't even find people that I know are in my contacts. Like I don't know what the blocker is.
Mm,
But you know, they've got sort of the poster child for like the first version of having some sort of agent work for you, and now they're like way behind. So maybe they would be somebody that would need to innovate through acquisition. Um, then for them, because obviously they are an immensely innovative company themselves, it doesn't absolve them from encountering issues in development and, series a perfect example of something that was pretty much a fail for them. So that would be an interesting one to see. But I think there'll be a lot of companies that are independent and are key players in the AI world. And then there'll be ones that are kind of AI adjacent that'll do things that we didn't think they would be able to do. Like, for example, what's Zoom going to do with AI? I haven't given it much thought, but you can sure bet that there's a bunch of people there thinking about it, and who knows what they're going to come up with, just to give
Yeah,
you an example.
that is the beauty of AI. We're very much in the infancy, and exciting days are ahead
Yeah.
as we see what people dream up with this stuff. Well, long before the world of AI, if we can step back in time for a moment, you stepped into the world of finance.
hmm
What drove you to get into this world, and did you ever dream in any way that it would become what it's become decades later?
Uh, so I got into venture in '99, which was, the just as the internet bubble was cresting and
Fair.
going to topple over. Or I should say, the internet wave was cresting and about to topple over. And I got into it because I was really attracted to the idea of innovation and like new ideas and being able to finance companies that were doing that kind of stuff. Um, and definitely the world of finance has changed immensely, since that time, 25 years ago. I mean, just the amount of capital that has flowed into private equity and venture capital is, I don't know how much bigger it is than when I first got involved in it, but it's, significantly bigger today. Um, and this whole transformation of now we're at the stages where these higher value investment opportunities are now somewhat being democratized and made more available to the consumer market, which is, a maturation of like in investing innovation that's happening. So I think if I remember correctly, either it's BlackRock or Blackstone or both of them, are coming up with investment products that give consumers access to private equity style returns,
Mm,
basically by,
wow.
you know, taking structured deals in that market and then making them part of a portfolio that can be purchased by consumers. There's a lot of that's been going on in real estate for a while. So I think what we're seeing is this gradual access that's unfolding to give, um, you know, m- more typical retail investors access to innovative investments, that are were historically just, kept in the hands of institutions.
So they're taking these, because typically when investors invest in private equity, right, they're signing up for multiple years while the firm does its thing over the life of its charter. You're saying they're now saying, well, maybe they don't have to be in for the full cycle. It's like, hey, we've got this
I
company
don't
we've
know
bought.
exactly. I don't know exactly how they're structured, but I know that there's innovation happening to be able to make those types of investments, you know, available to different layers of the investment community that go closer and closer to retail. I don't know exactly how they
Mm,
work. I'll be honest with you.
okay.
Um, I do know how some of the real estate ones work, and those are ones where you are really locked in. And they've got versions of them where they make them available to non-accredited investors, and they've got versions that make them available to accredited investors. But think of it as like, one of these real estate investment platforms could buy a strip mall, you know, turn it into a bunch of shares with a prospectus and a horizon on how the dividends are going to be paid out of the vehicle, and then what the hold period looks like, and you're kind of like in that deal, and you're in there until, and then maybe if you want to sell, you can put it back to the originator, or the originator can find somebody to buy your stake. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but
Yeah.
there's plenty of ways to like figure that out. And then obviously they've got to deal with all the compliance and regulatory aspects to make sure that um, they're not selling it to investors who are, not supposed to be, who aren't capable of handling that type of risk, et cetera.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how it all evolves. That'll
Yeah.
be interesting for sure. Well, you saw successful businesses, you saw a number of unsuccessful ones as you went through the years. Was there a particular deal or experience you had with a company that really brought home a lesson that you keep at the forefront of your mind or the back of your mind? That would maybe is a better way to say it steadily.
Um, I mean, I can think of a couple, but I think if I want to go back to what I was saying earlier in the conversation, where we were talking about business models that have sort of the wind at their back, going back to like the Canva model. I did have a transaction that I did, after the internet bubble burst, a few years after that. It was a high school sports website called Max Preps, which I believe is still today the leading high school sports content property in the United States. We actually sold it to CBS, bought it.
Oh,
But that was one of those things where you knew kids and parents were going online and were really interested in the community of sports locally, whether they were just fans or whether they had kids that were playing. And what the CEO and founder of Max Preps did was he had aligned himself pretty early on with the various newspaper organizations that were at the time the the paper version of reporting on high school sports,
mm-hmm.
which in this day and age seems incredibly antiquated. But if you go back to like the 90s, that's where you could consume local sports in your local sports content is where you could um, see the high school sports results. And what he did was he basically just transformed it into a much bigger concept that relied on broadband availability, mobile phones, not so much at the time, but good tools online to allow parents, coaches, players to upload game tape, um, crowdsource the results, and make them available to the whole community, which in some instances, when you look at things like high school basketball, which, has a whole sort of national ranking, and there's like the top players, do converge in some specific events. You basically were opening it up to the whole, country to be able to see like, how are the top players in the country doing on any given in any given game.
Mm-hmm.
Football though was the sport that really carried um, that web property, because that really has, maybe it has definitely a bit of the national dynamic, but much more strength in like the state level dynamics, because it's sort of like a precursor to, the college game, and it really is like communities of influence. And the CEO of that company, the founder, really understood that, and he was able to make this leap. And he basically built the leader, and there was nobody that was going to catch him. Once he dominated California basketball and football, New York basketball, Texas football, Florida football, that was kind of it. There was nobody that could catch him after that.
Mm.
And so then we grew that company, and then there was competition to buy it. All of the large media companies wanted to have a high school property in the sports space, and CBS
Mm.
ended up being the winning bidder.
That's very fascinating, and I like following college sports, in particular football, right? Like it's the sport that seems to get the most attention. But it's interesting how, the college season's coming up here. I think what, next week, I guess it starts, or
Yeah,
maybe
next
this
week
coming weekend. Yeah. And
or this weekend. Sorry, this weekend. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, wow, it's that close. Where'd the summer go? But it's interesting to see how in the media for like specific schools, specific colleges that I'll keep up with, you've seen more and more material about the high school sector. And it's like the high school game is being elevated slowly but surely. It's getting more and more of that national prominence. And so I was just thinking about that as you were sharing that, whereas, 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's real appetite for, original content and entertainment that changes dynamically year to year. So why should high school sports be any different? It's probably even more hyper local than the college game, but this is the whole reason why Max Preps was successful, right? Is that
Yeah.
there's value there, and people enjoy it. They get a lot of entertainment out of it. And so it doesn't surprise me that there's going to be even more evolution, in that regard.
Well, as parents, we're never going to get tired about talking about seeing our kids succeed, our kids' teams succeed. I think we're fairly safe. That's not going away. So
This is true.
it's a winning. It made sense. It's a winning formula. It made sense. I love it. So looking back, before you jumped into the company you're running today, what would you say was the most difficult season of your career, and how did it shape the way you guide entrepreneurs today and, running the company you're running today, which we'll talk about momentarily?
Um, I think for me, what I try to do with the entrepreneurs is, um, keep them focused on like a few rules of engagement for them that I think helps simplify their approach to execution and strategy. So, one of the things that I try to focus them on is what it's called the Eisenhower box, which is what's important and what's urgent. And a lot of times we're having conversations about prioritizing things, and I'll use that as a tool for them to really figure out like what's most important versus and urgent versus not much so they can make a real distinction between what they should be paying attention to and what they shouldn't. Um, the another thing that I another tool that I use is this help them figure out like is this something that's in your control or something that's not in your control, and we want to focus on things that we can control. Or if they're not paying enough attention to things they can control, that's often an interesting conversation. It's like, hey, why aren't you working on these things? Because they're 100% in your control. And if you make these changes, you can accelerate your growth or reduce your expenses. Um, and these are all within your ability and capability to do it. Um, so those are kind of like two mental models that I use for coaching with executives and with founders. Um, Another one that I really also like to talk to them about is what are their goals and their objectives? You know, like why do they do what they do? Why is the business that they're in so important to them, and what do they want to get out of it? Uh, Sometimes they don't really have anybody that they talk to about that, you know. And obviously they're all trying to run more profitable businesses that can grow. A lot of them are interested in, building, their own personal wealth. But there's also like the softer side of it, being successful, having a really good team. And all those things I think are part of the mix for, business leaders to feel like they're connected to what they're doing. And so having those types of conversations are also, pretty important. And you know, and in changing situations, those types of motivations may also change. So I think our job as a high grade CFO service is really to be involved with the management team so that we can have those types of conversations.
So let's pick up off of that. You're having this conversation with their management team, and typically a lot of the challenges, right, like it could be operational, it could be management, it could be distribution, like right, depending on the company, what they're doing, and so forth. But it always comes back to people, right? It always comes back to. I'll never forget when I was a young IT professional, a person who was double my age. They had this little event in the company, and he says to me, and it was the first time I'd been to something like that. He's like, "Oh," and of course I enjoyed it, learned a lot, and he wasn't as enthused, and he said, "Frank, it's always a people problem." And I never forgot those words. Yeah, that was probably getting on to 30 years ago now. But I've never forgotten that because now looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was about it. So when you guys come in to the teams, these teams are asking you to help with X, Y, Z, but knowing that, like, how do you help companies address the people challenges? Knowing, and it's not like no one doesn't already know that, right?
Yeah, depending on how deep we get into the organization, we'll have different views of the people. Sometimes it's only people related to finance. Sometimes it's across the whole organization. But um, we generally try to operate with another simple mental model, which is right people in the right seats.
Mm,
And the more that we understand about the organization, we really get a sense of like, okay, what are the right roles in this company? And then who are the right people to occupy those? And you want to have like a perfect one-to-one match on those. And usually when this mentor of yours said, it's always, Frank, it's always a people problem, he's talking about either wrong person, right seat, or wrong person, wrong seat. And so wrong person, wrong seat's an easy one, right? It's like, hey, I don't need this role and this person's not good for my organization. Right person, actually, no, then you have wrong person, right seat. So the role is right, but the person isn't good for your org. And then you could have right person, wrong seat. Good person, want to keep them in the organization. They're sitting in the wrong role. We should find something else for them to do. And we usually try to help the management teams kind of frame it out in that way.
mm,
Um, and they know who the good people are. It's just making the hard decisions about how am I going to
mhm.
fix the the problem children that every organization has. Um, Another thing that I've said to some management teams is, if you're gonna um, talk about your C players and do nothing about them, just remember that all the A players know who the C players are.
Mm,
It's not a secret. They don't talk about it, but they know who they are. And the longer you hold on to those people, the less valuable you make the A players feel. Because
mm,
A players want to be around A players. And so keep that in mind. And it's something that we talk about with management teams. It's another way to get them to make changes, especially if we think they're really really needed. That usually motivates an interesting discussion because the minute they hear that their best people are feeling either not respecting management because they're holding on to the C players or feeling disrespected themselves because they have to work with people that are not pulling their weight, management kind of reacts to that usually in a way that's like, wow, we really should fix that,
yeah.
because that's a sort of like just this undercurrent of negativity that when you describe it that way, all of a sudden it becomes like, wow, I need to do something about that.
I was gonna say, I like that phrasing. That's good. Because it's a different perspective, right? Because you're thinking, wait a minute, my best person, because I mean, we're people. We all have, we tend to know a little bit more than sometimes we all give ourselves credit
Oh,
for.
they
So,
all
that's it.
know.
Exactly.
They all know.
So,
It's not like they don't know. Of course they know who the lower performers are.
but that
And if they're a
idea
high
of,
performer, they they want to be around other high performers.
yeah, that idea of feeling your better people feeling less valued. I like that. That's strong. That's strong. That's
Yeah.
strong. I, yeah, that made sense. So let's talk about the money side. So, you got the people thing, but then a lot of entrepreneurs, businesses, there's challenges with the financials. You're doing CFO and analytics. I saw it here. I still have it on my screen. CFO Pro plus analytics. By the way, I love how you have all the calculators on the website. I thought that was super cool.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah. Thank you.
and but a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like they know there's an issue with the finances. The books aren't quite as good as they need to be. There's challenges, and it can feel overwhelming, right? Like they're just trying to run a company. They don't necessarily want to be in the weeds of every last number. How do you help business owners start feeling like, hey, we can get this under control so that, it's all going to be okay?
Yeah. Um, First of all, we do a quick triage of the books themselves. Um, a lot of times the bookkeeping capability is below the level that's required for us to be successful and to give the client a really good outcome. So
Wow.
there's usually some triage work that needs to be done there. Um, Related to that, we might uncover some systems issues that make the work very slow and therefore not something that you can spin out on a regular basis very efficiently, which also would need to be fixed. Um, and then it's really the other bookend of it is like, you know, understanding what the needs and the concerns are of the executive team or the owners
Mhm.
and try to get them data and analysis as quickly as possible that provides some value while we build up to, a very high quality, like recurring advisory function with a lot of good reports behind it and not reports for report's sake. We help them figure out like what are the key drivers and then be able to package those into information that's very digestible to them.
Mhm.
Um, that we try to work on relatively quickly so that we can get them thinking in a way that's going to be aligned with the ultimate set of services and capabilities that we give to them. But in order to get um, to that um, kind of reporting and strategic advisory capability, that will always be hampered if the bookkeeping is kind of janked up and needs work on it. That's why we have to do that triage part at the beginning to really understand what do we have that we're working with. And sometimes it's great. Most of the times it's not good enough.
Mm, mm. Well, if you're having to come in and help with fixing bookkeeping, then yeah, there's some work in order for sure.
There's definitely work. I mean, there's work all the way along the value chain, but you know, if it's hard to get the financials out and then be able to package them in a way that's understandable and usable, um, you gotta fix that. Otherwise, you're really not going to be able to do a whole lot with the higher end strategic advisory work.
Yeah, I sat in on a session, I guess it was a couple plus years ago now, where a CEO who'd been to this day, heavily involved in M&A work, and he was talking to a room of successful entrepreneurs, and it was still one of the most fascinating conversations I ever sat in, because he comes out and he spends like 3 hours talking about the profit and loss statement. And I thought, and the thing was, it made perfect sense. And I got to the end of that meeting thinking, I want a refund from all my CPAs. Because I just learned more about the P&L than I did in all these years paying. And it really just broadened my perspective that it's understanding our numbers as a business owner, how vital it really was. That it's not just a line item with a figure, but what does it really mean, and how does that correlate with your business in terms of profitability, EBITDA, and and that's before
Yeah,
getting
and
right.
what are the fundamental drivers too?
Exactly.
Did your customer acquisition costs go up or down? Why did that happen? Was there some sort of innovation that you had or that you need to have in order to make it more um, profitable for you in the future? These are all things that, as part of the strategic finance
Yes,
role.
a driver of strategic questions.
Yeah.
Made all the difference. So it was a wonderful thing, but it was an eye opener, especially in real estate. We're dealing with big numbers on a per property basis. You're like, whoa, what? So today's business climate, I wanted to ask you. It's dynamic, right? We're in a new presidency now. There's been some there's a lot of things happening very quickly in today's world, at a pace that, quite frankly, it seems like a lot of people are not used to. And I mean, where do you see all of this going? Just 10,000-foot view in the world of finance. Like,
Um, I think for me, the big thing that I'm just curious to see how it plays out is the whole tariff thing. Um, that there's, I think, some obvious themes that people are looking for to transpire, but because there's this whipsawing around of what the amounts are going to be and who they're going to be applied to, we're going to get to the end game kind of slowly. And I would say along the way to that end game, it'll become kind of evident what the impact of that is going to be. We're not quite there yet. They were just talking last week that the PPI numbers were up, and that's related to the tariffs starting to trickle into the producer price index. Um, and so I'm sure there's other people out there who know much better than I do about how certain that connection is between those two things. I'm just, uh, an observer of CNBC and the Wall Street Journal, and I read what I read and I try to interpret it. So I can't say that I can validate that there's like a definitive connection there, but there's probably something there. And I think that how that really unfolds and affects the rest of the economy sort of remains to be seen. I think the troublesome thing for me is that it does seem to me very obvious that tariffs do ultimately become a tax on the consumer. Um, and the benefits of trying to reshore manufacturing do take a long time. Maybe in this day and age, not in certain industries, not as long as it would have, a decade ago, but it still
Sure.
takes a long period of time. So, uh, will that trade-off be worth it? I don't really know for certain, but I'm interested to see what happens. Um, I think the other part of that I think about with respect to my own clients is um, the economy, for the last couple of decades has been built around this ability to leverage less expensive manufacturing abroad. And a lot of Americans have made their livelihood leveraging that into the US economy. So in fact, a lot of jobs probably have been created around that. And, we've supposed, not we've supposedly, but we have lost jobs in manufacturing as a sort of they've been offshored. But we've also built a lot of other jobs that relied on that. So it's not it's a little bit more like a potentially a zero sum game, where now you took the air out of manufacturing a bunch of years ago. Now you're gradually going to reinsert some strength into it, but at the same time, you might be dragging down all these new businesses that got formed around that part of the economy, and
Mhm.
it's not a winner take all situation. And that I think is true because I've seen it with my own portfolio of companies. I've seen it with other people that I talk to who are in the CFO services industry, and we talk about how it's affecting different businesses. And businesses need to maneuver and kind of figure it out. But that'll be an interesting one that will probably maybe by the end of the year, beginning of next year, we'll have a better sense of how exactly that affected everything.
Yeah. So, and the reason I asked is, and you started to touch on it, is you're an entrepreneur today in the United States. Maybe you're early, maybe you've been at it for a while. What are some of those things we should be doing to be as prepared as possible, especially when we're really not sure what's going to come down the road, right? Because you're seeing all these changes, and a lot of people I've talked to are like, what's this really mean for me? Well, we may not know, but what can we do to prepare for as much as we can be prepared for?
That's a tough one to answer. I think you have to be spending a little bit of your time, if you're a busy business owner, just taking in some CNBC, getting some of the business headlines, spend time with your peers in similar businesses, hear what they're saying, what they're hearing, make it more like a community of information gathering, and definitely dedicate some of your time to doing that. That's probably the best way to be prepared because you don't want to be blindsided. And if you hear things that you think are going to be important and highly impactful to your business, whether good or bad, you need to be in a position to take advantage of those. And that's really just making the time to gather the information and, you know, being able to digest it and understand what exactly it means for your business.
Yeah.
A lot of business owners are heads down trying to run their businesses. They don't have time to do it. But I would say, like, if you're in one of these fields that are being affected by these large scale changes, you definitely got to keep your head above water to see what's going on out there.
Yeah. The waves are coming and they're already in progress.
Yeah. exactly.
We're not sure which way they're always moving, but they are moving. That is for sure. Wonderful. Well, Salvatore, thank you for coming on today. This was insightful. Some really interesting thoughts that you shared to consider. And I love how it's clear that you spend a lot of time in the world of strategy, which is an area where, as entrepreneurs, we do need to spend some more time. And you said it yourself, rather than having a heads down approach to things. So, thank you again for sharing. And to our listeners, if you're interested in the services Salvatore offers, we'll have the link to his website below with fractional CFO work, strategic work. You got a taste of it today. Obviously, incredibly knowledgeable and well experienced, and no question he can help your business. So, if that's something you want to seek out, feel free to connect with him at the links below. So, Salvatore, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciated hearing these insights. Can you leave us with a final word?
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about building a business, or you are building a business, or making a career change, um, leverage your network, be kind to people, and it'll all come back and pay off for you. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. You just got to make the time and focus to be able to go out there and grab it, and and leverage your network of resources and experts. There's a lot of good information, and I find people are generally pretty helpful when they've got something that you don't know about. So take advantage of that for sure.
Love it. Love it. There's a lot of helpful people out there. Love it. So true. Well, Salvatore, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Frank.